And we're back once again, only on It's Last Call. Last call to the alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com. And joining me here, usually we have him on talk some Chiefs, talk some NFL, but he's been working here. He's been working hard. If you followed him, he's been working hard on his big board, breaking down drafts, breaking down players. Eat your heart out, Mel Kiper. This guy's doing it. Now, his hair is also just not gray yet. Give it time. It's going to be the NFL draft season. But this man here is once again joining us, and we're proud to have him on. I give you, from Arrowhead Addict, I give you Price Carter. So, Price, let's start off here with first talk about the big board itself. Like, when you decide to do this, how much work went into it, and how much were you sitting there going, oh my God, what did I get myself into? This is never going to end.
Yeah, so for the last couple of years, I've just done an Arrowhead Addict specific big board that kind of just like focuses on the Chiefs' thresholds, the Chiefs' needs, their kind of tendencies when it comes to the draft and what they like. And this year I decided I still have the Arrowhead Addict big board, but this year I decided to really just kind of go full send on the draft. And I'm writing up 100 prospects in 100 days. So I think it started early January. We started, a prospect every single day is publishing an 800 word plus scouting report with a film cut up from me on there. Fortunately, I was able to work ahead a little bit. So I started early December on some of the guys that you knew were coming out. And that way I've got a little bit of a cushion built up, so I'm not just like sitting there waiting to publish a piece every single day. But it's been a lot of fun. I wish I could say I had some sort of exact science of how I'm going through it. I'm kind of going through the consensus big board and looking at players there, like, try to get 100 players that are basically the top 100 on the consensus big board. But I've also kind of dabbled in some guys. I just like I don't know much about this guy. Let's take a look at him. Like the other day, I did Michael Trigg specifically because when I watched him on Saturdays during the college football season, I was like, this guy's a baller. This guy rocks. I want him on my team. And then I would listen to people who I trust talk about him, and they weren't so bullish. So I was like, all right, well, let's dig in there and see why that is. Why is the opinion so different of him from people? And truth be told, I have to give it up to him. They were right. There was a lot of holes in his game.
Well, we're going to start with an easy one that everybody is agreement on in terms of he is the best player in the draft. That's Caleb Downs. Albert Breer, Dane Brugler, Bill Sparks have all said, hey, this guy's the perfect player. He is just the best safety in terms of like the history of safety. So break it down for the plebeians here. What makes him so good considering he's not this huge monster of a safety like a Nick Ward? Like, why is Caleb Downs so damn good?
I think it's like if I could boil it down to one thing, I think it's that he makes looking the position play easy. Like it's effortless. He's so cerebral. He knows where to be at the right place, right time, a sure tackler, and kind of going along with that Nicky Manwari thing that you brought up to there too. He's so versatile. Like my comp for him is Antoine Winfield Jr. But he can do so many things well. He's big enough and strong enough that he can play in the box and still be an impact player there. He can play out of the slot as a cover, as just like a straight up slot corner. He can play the deep half of the field as well too. He's instinctual. He, he processes just so well. He's good at reading the QB's eyes. He's good in zone. He's good in man. Like he's just like the type of player that you can put anywhere and erase a problem. Whether it be your deep coverage, whether it be defense crashing down in dime or something like that, or even, putting him in the slot. Like he offers so much with his versatility, with his coverage. And then, you also got to look at the intangibles too. This kid came out, started for Nick Saban's defense as a true freshman, which is just unheard of. He was the number 8 prospect in the country when he came up. And then he moves over to Ohio State, a key cog and a national championship team. He's out there calling the coin toss in the national championship game as a sophomore, as a transfer, the leadership skills there, and then followed it up by, playing in a very complex Matt Patricia defense this year that was very, very good. And obviously they didn't achieve their ultimate goal, but the profile is just, it's so high. And I think way too often, especially in the draft community, we spend time talking about ceiling and potential. His teammate Arvelle Reese has this potential, the ceiling of one of the best players in the game. But his floor is not nearly as high as Caleb Downs. And that's what I come back to as to why he should be, either the consensus number one overall player on most people's boards or darn close to it, is that I feel like his floor is just like a really good safety. His ceiling is a perennial all pro, and that's exciting, but I just have a hard time seeing this guy coming in the league and not being a very good player.
The one knock I've heard is he's not the athlete. Like when you look at strong safeties who, or even free safeties you want to draft, it's we mentioned Nick Manowari. We definitely got to mention Kyle Hamilton, who's also played cornerback. If Downs is, as you said, a guy who can do everything, Kyle Hamilton is a guy who can do everything and more some. And then there's Sean Taylor, there's DeRon James. Like they're either bigger, faster, stronger, maybe more diverse. Does he like is I guess is he one of those guys, or as you said, is he more closer to a Minka Fitzpatrick, a Antonio Winfield Jr., which is good, but it's not game changer great.
Yeah, I think that again, going back to the Nicky Man Ward conversation, I saw someone post yesterday, a day or two ago, like, are we really surprised that Nicky Manwari was great? And they posted his relative athletic score. But actually, if you go look at the safety position at the top athletic performers, it's not really indicative of success for players. There's some positions that makes a lot of sense. You think about edge rushers, you think about wide receivers, things like that. But some of the best safeties in the league aren't necessarily elite testers. Like I go back to Brian Branch, who fell out of the first round because, well, is he a nickel? Is he a true safety? He didn't test that well, and turns out, he's a really good player. I think like you know it sounds like he's not going to test overly dynamic. Honestly, he might not even test. I could see him being a guy who just lays on his tape. But if you look at some of the best players in the league, like your Kyle Hamilton's, that sort of like, Kyle Hamilton, he had a 42nd percentile 40-yard dash, a 45th percentile 10-yard split. Good in the vertical broad jump, 93 percentile, 80% in the vertical jump. I mean, it's not necessarily a position that I think pure athleticism is what matters the most, which is weird because it is a position that relies a lot on your mobility. But I think his instincts make up for that. I think my only knock for him, like watching his tape, he's not a guy that I think you're gonna like have receivers fear over the middle of the field. You just don't see him laying the wood like certain safeties do. He's not a headhunter in that way, which I mean, who knows? It's college football. You get kicked out for like 6 months if you tackle someone the wrong way or something ridiculous. So maybe that's just it. But I didn't watch him and say like, wow, people are gonna really fear him over the middle of the field. But either way, I think that the floor is so high for him that I wouldn't worry about the testing very much.
So I want to give a shout out to John Helmkamp because he's been pounding on this that hey, Caleb Downs deserves to be a top five pick. He should be a top five pick. How tough is it though, and especially today when the NFL is like, okay, you go quarterback number one, number two, edge, left tackle, number three, right tackle, defensive tackle, maybe number one wide receiver. I mean, safety is considered like, okay, it's in between sort of off-ball linebacker and running back. Like, yeah, it's nice, but it's not huge. So how far could he fall just because teams going, well, we need this more than him? Yes, he might be an all-pro safety, but we need a quarterback if you're the Raiders, or we need an edge player like half the teams of a top five, or we need a tackle. Browns, Giants. Like, how far could he drop in your eyes just because it's a safety?
Yeah, I could see. I think when you look at take, honestly, it does kind of remind me a little bit of the running back conversation. Less so though, because a safety can be great independent of their surrounding cast, right? We've seen good safeties on bad teams like Jesse Bates on the Falcons, etc., where running backs they can be Ashton Genty level good, but if the offensive line and the scheme isn't helping them out, they really struggle to be special. I think when you look at Caleb Downs and like measuring what his draft floor is, I think you just to me, I think the floor is the Bengals at 10. Like if he's there at 10, why wouldn't the Bengals just try to go get their next, great safety that like we just mentioned, who went to the Falcons? I don't understand why he would fall past that. And I think the other thing is like there's a lot of teams, and I've been bringing this up with the offensive line class too. There's a lot of teams that just need good football players and like screw the rest of it. So if it's Francis Maui Noah, like okay, he might be a tackle, he might be a guard, You need both. So just take one and give him the chance to fail at tackle first, similar to like Will Campbell, and then kick him on the inside if you need to. You just need good football players. I think the Patriots conversation kind of distorted that a little bit because going into this year, I don't think anybody really expected them to be playing in a Super Bowl. They were ahead of schedule. So the Will Campbell discussion, whether he's a guard or a tackle or whatever, I think their timeline accelerated, so that made that conversation a little exacerbated. So you want to have the infrastructure in place and have the need. There's some teams that Caleb Downs might not be right for. Like I kind of think about the Giants a little bit there. I know Todd McShay gave them Caleb Downs, which you could see it. Harbaugh had a star safety there in Baltimore, but on the same breath, like you want to do everything you can to support your young rookie quarterback. So is that another wide receiver? Is that a tackle? Those type of things. So I do think he needs to be the right fit. But I just think there's enough teams in the top 10 that just need something. And like I said, obviously the Bengals could probably spend every pick on defense in this draft and it be warranted.
If Caleb Downs is considered the number one safety, top anywhere between top five to top 10 ish pick, where's Emmanuel McNeil Warren? Because this is a guy who none of us had on our boards, I'd say, this past September. It was like, okay, it's this guy. Hey, it's Bud Clark. And then quietly we start noticing Emmanuel McNeil Warren. Then all of a sudden, around like November, December, he really started picking up a lot of speed. Second team All American, third team AP All American selection, Jim Thorpe semifinalist. Went to the Senior Bowl. A lot of people were very impressed with him. Like, how good would he? First off, here's a big question: if he was on an ACC team or SEC team, would he be fighting with Caleb Downs for top one or two safety?
I don't think so. This kind of, I just actually finished my write up on Dylan Thieneman too. And I think like the thing that makes Caleb Downs is that he can do both what McNeil Warren does well and what Thieneman does well. McNeil Warren, I think, first off, talk about Toledo here for a second. There's probably going to be their third defender in three straight drafts that are figures to be a top first two round picks. Darius Alexander, the kid from the Eagles, whose name is escaping me right now, the cornerback, and now him. I think you look at him, and that's more of that Nick Warrior, like your big nickel, a guy who can play in the slot, play close to the box. I don't like him in the deep half nearly as much as I like Thieneman back there or Downs back there. I think there are some limitations with with his athleticism overall. It doesn't always take the best pursuit angles, and is okay in coverage, but not the most instinctual in coverage compared to others. But you like him best playing downhill, and I do think that he's big enough and physical that he can be that big slot. You talk about Mike McDonald and him talking about the importance of being able to defend the run out of dime. That's the type of versatility that he offers you towards the line of scrimmage. Versus Thieneman, I think he's more of a pure free safety type. He can play in the box and has good flashes there, but I think he's at his best covering the deep part of the field and crashing on routes and coverage and is very instinctual and a high level athlete. So I think the difference between those three guys is just that Downs can do all those things very well. Whereas McNeil Warren, you want close to the line of scrimmage. You love the athletic profile. You love how big and strong he is. You like some of the splash plays you see in the run game from him, and the ball production is pretty decent as well too. And Thieneman, it's more just kind of the overall coverage ability. I still think all three guys are probably like top 50 picks. It's a good safety class. That's kind of the point I was making with the Chiefs earlier yesterday. Is like, hey, I don't know that you want to go and re-sign Brian Cook. Some Chiefs fans would like to see him back in Kansas City. Whenever there's a crop of guys, and I feel really good about maybe one of McNeil Warren or Thieneman being available at pick 40 when the Chiefs are back on the clock in the second round.
So we'll stick for Emmanuel McNeil Warren because he's the guy we didn't know until later on. When you're doing a scouting report, how tough is it sometimes? Like, and we'll get to some other guys later on this show. Like, he didn't face the best competition. It was still MAC, it's still Toledo, but it's not ACC, SEC, Big Ten. So when you're doing your scouting reports and write-ups, how tough is it trying to figure, okay, does he have the athleticism to do well in the NFL, where all of a sudden every wide receiver is running a 4.3, every running back has 4.45 speed. Like, how tough is it figuring if he's good or if he's just college good?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a valid point, and honestly, I think it's okay to admit that's one of the things that's a little bit harder about this. And I think one thing that you obviously go to is you do try to find those games. Typically they'll play a couple of teams that are out of conference games that might be the gimme for a more Power Five team. So you try to see how he played against those teams. That's a place that I always go, especially when I'm trying to do these type of guys where they are more out of more out of conference type of guys. And then you want to see the results too. I will say with him, like when you look at him, you can see the size difference and the physicality difference compared to him to some of those receivers. Like it does show up on tape. And then, this is kind of just leaning on some, I don't want to call it lazy analysis, but you can also look at the fact that like, hey, Toledo's been putting guys in the league for a little bit. So like for McNeil Warren, I went to the game against Kentucky, where, by the way, Toledo was pretty feisty in that game. They lost that game 24-16. And, they played against Western Kentucky, too, who's put some guys in the league, too. So you try to look at those, and then they played against Louisville in the bowl game. So you try to stack those up, and they almost won the game against Louisville, too. So you try to stack those games up and see if you can get a flash of them. But hey, like that's the reason why I'm sitting here doing a podcast on a microphone in my basement and not, holding a clipboard on the sideline of a college program or an NFL program.
Now, if you think McNeil Warren was tough, let's go to player number three. And you heard this during the Senior Bowl. Holy crap, this guy's huge. Holy crap, he's actually pretty damn good. That is Ted Hurst of the Georgia State Panthers, a guy who all of a sudden now is I've heard is he was undrafted free agent. Now he's rising up the second round. Hey, there's some people like low first round. Physically, he matches up. He's 6'3", 195 pounds, 71 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. And we heard the Senior Bowl. Like he's fluid, runs decent routes. Where do you put him? And again, how if we thought McNeil Warren was tough, how tough is it with Hurst, where you're looking going, great? What happens when you take on a cornerback who will stick on you like white on rice?
Yeah, with Hurst too, like I went to the Memphis tape because that's a closer to a Power Five program. He had a good game there too. I think with Ted Hurst, the thing you like first off is just like the vertical stretch. He's very quick, very sudden. Has kind of a bigger frame, though he's more slightly built, but it's tough. Something that I struggle with is, and honestly, I struggle with the Indiana guys a little bit with this too, is like these super RPO heavy schemes you just don't get these long developing routes unless they're third and long, right? So you don't really get to see what it looks like when the play breaks down out of context because if the play breaks down and it's an RPO and the quarterback tucks the ball, like there is no throwing the ball then because the linemen are downfield. So it's basically if the pass play either works or it doesn't, and then it's just block for the running or block for the quarterback who's scrambling. I likened him to like what the Chiefs had this year in Tyquan Thornton. I saw some George Pickens comp on him. I just don't see as strong a guy at the catch point there, and I think Pickens has probably got 20 pounds on him. But Tyquan Thornton, the Chiefs version of Tyquan Thornton, the guy that they had this year, I can see a lot of them. The downfield stretch, really good on a post route, pretty explosive after the catch too, above average speed. I know that he was one of the guys that Todd McShay highlighted in his new newsletter from the Senior Bowl. He's a guy that I think you can like. It honestly reminds me a little bit of Jalen Royals, who the Chiefs drafted last year, who came from another offense that was very different than an NFL style offense. Like Royals pretty much lined up in the exact same spot on the field every single game, every single snap. So the transition period might not be as seamless there. But I mean, hey, we've seen these guys come in and play well, right? From these offenses that are a little less conventional, like a Puka Nacua, someone like that from BYU, obviously a bigger program than Georgia State, but that offense as well is very gimmicky. So I think his calling card is definitely his speed down the field and surprisingly tough after the catch too. I do think that he's a guy that has a future in this league. It's just kind of where is he going to fit? Where is he going to go? I personally wouldn't see him in round, like I'd start thinking about him in round three. I just feel like there's other players who have higher floors as a second round pick, like whether it be like Jeremy Bernard, Chris Brazzell from Tennessee, those type of guys. I really think day two receivers is really going to start coming into more of what you are looking for versus those round one guys, Lemon, Tate, Boston, those type of guys, Tyson. You're looking more for who can be a superstar, who can be a game changer, a math changer on our offense.
With Hurst. again, does the Senior Bowl help him out more than other people because we got to see him like, okay, he went stride for with cornerbacks. Hey, he's not there's no physicality because it's Senior Bowl practices, but you at least got to see, okay, hey, he can match up with, a Colton Hood, with D'Angelo Ponce, somebody who these are Big Ten guys. Like, how much does that help when you're scouting? Like, okay, yeah, it's workouts, but he doesn't look out of place.
Yeah, I this is the beautiful part about the Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl and those other type of bowl games that you do get to see players against a higher level of competition. And it definitely means something that Ted Hurst showed out at the Senior Bowl and had a good performance there. Now, also recognizing that Senior Bowl, it's kind of tough because some of those things you're watching are one-on-one reps that definitely favor the wide receiver, where they can run those TikTok routes where it's like, okay, it's been 7 seconds. The quarterback is actually decapitated by Myles Garrett at this point in a real NFL game, but you're still, chopping your feet. But it certainly matters, and that's what's great about those bowl games is that they do give an opportunity. You look at Gray Zabel last year, North Dakota State tackle had a great Senior Bowl on the inside, ends up being a first round pick and a big part of the offensive line that helps win a Super Bowl for the Seahawks. So very important. Glad that he accepted that, and it sounds like he really stepped up to the occasion too.
All right. The most polarizing wide receiver in the draft. And you, and of course, our Anthony Russo, shout out to him and the draft professors. I can hear you looking at this guy. We go, oh, we should take this. Ugh. I mean, literally, it's like when a little kid gives, you give a little kid like broccoli, he goes, oh, no, no, hard pass. That's Chris Brazzell the second. Talent-wise, it's not questioned. You have said if you are the Chiefs or you are the Ravens or you are, the Texans or any team that needs a wide receiver, you would not touch this guy with a 10-foot pole. What is it on the tape that makes you worried? And what is it about Chris Brazzell of a second that you go, hard pass, really hard pass?
Well, I think he's a little bit of an interesting prospect. I think first off, you just kind of go with like what a lot of people go with, and that's the Tennessee helmet, right? Where a lot of people scout the helmet and say they don't love this guy because that Josh Heupel system is just not put wide receivers in the league and set them up for success. The first thing you like about Brazzell is the height weight speed combo, right? He's about 6'4", 205 pounds, but is expected to run 4.5 or less. He's very explosive. One of the things that I kind of came to with him that I just noticed is some of his biggest games. And to be clear, you have to give the player credit for this, but like if the cornerback isn't diving for the ball at that time and there's just nothing green grass behind him, the Georgia game comes to mind there, which is kind of the game that put him on the radar this year where he had that huge game. I don't know that that happens in the NFL, that there was just a lot of broken plays that he was able to house. I do think that he is a above average route runner, especially in man coverage. He's got some really nice whip routes and stuff. And even his junior year or sophomore year at Tulane, 711 yards, 5 touchdowns, pretty good season there. That's totally away and separate from Tennessee. For me, with him, and this is just more of a Chiefs thing. Pretty lengthy track record off the field. Several arrests related to driving with a suspended license, driving without insurance, failure to appear in court when he was supposed to. Just some judgment things that aren't necessarily what you love to see. And understandably, here in Kansas City, we're a little sensitive about wide receivers having issues with motor vehicles here lately. So like for all those reasons, besides the Tennessee helmet, besides the off the field stuff, there's also some loafing that is there on the tape. Like he's got some reps where he's just like, I think I'll just stand here and do nothing. And I understand that Tennessee, a lot of times they have these like 3x1s or sometimes even 4x1 formations where we're just the backside is basically doing nothing. But he's got some reps where he just decides to stop running and the play breaks down and he's basically just rendered himself useless, or blocking where like he's not blocking downfield, his guy goes and tackles the running back on what could have been a big chunk gain. So I think there's some things there that need to be answered. To me, again, he's just not a guy that I'm gonna want to spend a top 1 or 2 round pick on, which is where I think he'll probably go day two, probably. So that's my reason for pause with him.
With a guy like that, and we've heard this from you, from Bill Sparks, from John Vogel, a lot of these guys, is that, well, there's character concerns. Well, there's try hard. That's a lot of diva wide receivers, though. I mean, they are temperamental. Working hard. If they're in the play, great. If not, blocking sometimes. And this has gone on from the days of even I would argue, you know, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens. It's if they're in the play, it's great. If not, they're just sort of poop. We don't give a rat's ass. So if you are scouting this and you are drafting this, how tough is it trying to figure out? Okay, can we beat it out of him? Is it coachable? And is this something that, he will learn to get rid of in the NFL? Or is there always that worry that this is going to get worse once he gets paid?
Yeah, man, and that's really probably one of the things we're the least privy to, right? Like we don't get to be in those interview rooms. You look at the James Pierce situation from this last year and you read some of the comments that his teammates had to say about him, you're kind of like, wow, like this was a major red flag that we should have been more aware of, or people should have paid closer attention to. So ultimately, that eval, that's the difference between going and talking to the school janitor or his, ninth grade English teacher or whatever, and really understanding who this person is. So it is tough. I come back to something that Herm Edwards said back when he was in Kansas City, and he said, you can only have one or two my guys, and my guys are someone on that coaching staff, someone on that, a veteran in that team locker room, that's their guy to go and make sure that he's on the straight and narrow, that he's following up with stuff. I think you need to measure that with how many my guys do you have. When you have Rashee Rice, you have a my guy. Xavier Worthy had a little incident that kind of blew over and doesn't really seem to have that, and he's mostly been on the straight and narrow. But there's also been some just like lack of development there. The Chiefs clearly moved on from Connor Embry, who was a wide receiver coach this year, and actually hired someone who's qualified to be in that role, and Chad O'Shea from the Browns and former passing game coordinator there too. So I think you provide yourself a runway there a little bit. Like I really like Eric McAllister from TCU. He's got even more off-field issues than Brazzell does, but I think at that point you just kind of need to look at what you have in place in your locker room and how many of those guys can you afford.
Speaking of off-field of issues, this I'll say this: Darnell Jackson Jr. did everything right the last couple weeks. Went to the Shrine Bowl, killed it. Then decided to hop on a flight, jump on to the Senior Bowl, and did very well. You look at him, and what, first let's talk about the positives. He is a very, very large man at 6'5", 330 pounds. When you see the tape and you break him down, like, what is he the kind of guy that the defensive line coach can go, we can make him bigger and better. We can make him into that all-world defensive tackle if he's motivated and ready.
Yeah, he again, I think that's probably the deepest position in the draft, where the defensive tackle group. I just feel like there's several good players that are going to be available on day two, whether it be him, Dominic Orange, Dante Corleone, those sort of things. Like there's a lot of really talented guys that I think, profile mostly as a run stopper more than anything else. But you love the frame, you love the length, you love the power that he has. There's not a ton of like lateral agility. He's not really shown a ton of propensity to rush the passer. I think there's some pad level height issues there too. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Deion Walker from years prior. He's not quite. Deion Walker is massive. He's 6'5", 337. Darnell Jackson is, but Dion was like 6'7". There's some comparison. There's two. So I like him. I know some of the guys that we had at the Shrine Bowl here in Kansas City. They got an interview with him. They were very high on him. Really liked what the performance he put together there, and then was able to go to the Senior Bowl, which is always a great sign. So I like him. I definitely think like he's in that next wave. Like if you gave me him, Corleone, Orange, I think that a lot of those guys are probably pretty interchangeable about what they can do. I think Corleone's shown the most as rushing a passer, but there's some health concerns with him too.
So here's a question, and it's a chicken and the egg question here. It started with Darnell Jackson. He was asked this during the Senior Bowl, during the Shrine Bowl, NFL scouts. He took plays off. Well, maybe he had a bad attitude, those last two seasons. Florida State has been a hellhole. 2-10 his junior year, and the next year he comes back, and it's still 4-8, they're out of the playoffs. The whole thing is a mess. How tough is it figuring out, like, okay, is this going to be something that, will always happen? Or, hey, he'd been beaten down with loss after loss after loss, and you get him in a program that wins, and he'll be much more motivated because winning cures all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys in this draft that kind of have some questions to answer about that. You think about the Clemson guys, you think about the Penn State guys. All those guys were teams that were expecting to have much better, much different seasons than they ended up having. And, to that point, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Avion Terrell, Antonio Williams, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. Like, there's a lot of those guys who've got some questions to answer about what happened this season. And I really think it's probably just a little bit larger narrative in general about college football right now, where we're treating these players like paid professionals because they are. So you can't lean on the like, oh, well, they're just out of it. It's like, well, you were getting compensated to do this. This is your job. You need to be better than this. So I certainly think that it's not nothing. It's certainly not nothing. And, I know that Darnell Jackson's got some history with his mother and stuff like that. Like he was looking to get a hardship years to be able to move closer to take care of his mother, was ultimately denied it. So I think that there's probably more to him, the person, than we may know. And the draft process is great for highlighting some of those things. So hopefully more of that will come to light and we'll be able to speak more clearly on just who he is as a person.
I'm glad you brought that up because when we do our mock drafts and we do our scouting, especially, and you have a little more, let's say, I would say, clout and let's say connections than some of us here. How tough is it trying to figure out who these guys are when we can see the tape, we get all this, and then, as you said, there's the interviews, there's what you hear, what there is the backgrounds. Like how tough is it figuring out when, unlike NFL scouts and NFL GMs, we don't have this information. We're going on basically what we get in Google, MSN, ESPN reports, which they're not sometimes as accurate or as in detail as we want them to be.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think the first thing you look for is outliers, right? Like whenever you get someone that everyone raves about, whenever everyone raves about this guy, the player, you chalk that up as a positive, right? Some of the guys that come to mind are like Blake Miller. He's a guy that coaches rave about as far as the leadership. He's only missed one practice in his college career after getting surgery on his wrist and was back at practice the next day. Or kind of like what we talked about with Caleb Downs. Or you look at some of the intangibles on the field, like Elijah Surratt, just like showed up in the biggest moments for Indiana this year. Same with Omar Cooper, that catch against Penn State to save their perfect season. You look at those type of things and say like, hey, this probably means something. And, we'd talk a little bit about like Ty Simpson, a coach's kid. Um, that matters to teams, and I think that's a little bit of an outlier. Same goes for the other direction, right? Like I was talking about Eric McAllister, was charged with attempted assault with a deadly weapon, pointed a gun at someone, and pled guilty to a terroristic threat, got the assault charge dropped, and then violated his parole on THC. Hey, that's not nothing. Like I know THC and all that's kind of a changing face here. Like the days of Travis Kelce falling to the third round because he smoked a little dope or have changed a lot. But in the same breath, it's not nothing. And then there's the whole other element of like how coachable this guy is. He may not be in trouble with the law, but he might be a real AH to try to coach in the locker room. Those are the things that I think matter a lot. Being coachable, being able to be open and receptive to feedback, and then also acknowledging that these guys are not mentally, physically developed humans yet. Like they're still 18, 19, 20 years old. The prime of their, mental being is still not reached. So what are they going to be in a few years? What are they going to be when they get real money? When they get to a first round pick contract, those type of things? Are they the type of guy who's going to go rent a Lamborghini SUV and street race down a freeway in Texas? Or are they the type of guy that's going to keep their nose clean and come in and work hard to try to earn that second contract? So it's definitely something you got to focus on. To me, like I just try to pay attention to like the really noisy stuff, the stuff that's like this is widely known big issues. Like I kind of think about um Jermaine Burton, like an example, like he punched a girl in the face during a field storming when he was at Alabama. Like that's a problem. That's something that isn't going away. And he's been cut since then. So it's very clearly was an issue and remained an issue.
Well, if last two guys we talked about had character issues, this guy is the exact opposite. This is, I mean, I'm guessing if coaches could create, their perfect player in terms of character, morals, it'd be Jacob Rodriguez, the smartest, held, linebacker extraordinaire from Texas Tech, uh, married, to a military pilot, Catholic, team captain, leader of the defense. I mean, when you talk about intangibles, is this closest to like the defensive version of Tim Tebow in terms of just character, measurables, and just intangibles?
There's a lot to love for sure. I would like to believe that that high character is held up in that mustache that he has, which is excellent. That's one of the, when we're talking about intangibles, great facial hair, it's got to be one of the things in the conversation. But yeah, one thing that we'll talk about with Jacob Rodriguez that just needs to be mentioned is that he's probably playing in front of one of the best two or three defensive lines in the country, including Elite Hunter, who is a linebacker's best friend, just two gapping, holding up at the point of attack, keeping those rush lanes open. Romello Height, David Bailey, and they'll probably have some draft picks next year too from that defensive line. So his job was made easy, but that doesn't necessarily account for him leading all of FBS in turnovers. He has a filthy peanut punch. Got his hands on a couple of balls at the Senior Bowl too. He just has a knack for generating turnovers. And, he is a little bit slighter built. Like there was some brutal take going around on Twitter that he was a safety and that he's going to convert to safety because of his smaller frame and where he's at his best. But I don't know how you can come away with that conclusion and just say like he's not able to do it. That again to kind of like draw on the Seahawks a little bit. Like I think he does have some of the qualities that like an Ernest Jones has. And I absolutely agree. Like I think coaches, players, they're gonna love this guy, just for the type of person he is, the type of player he is, and talk about a guy who's capitalized on an opportunity. Like he came into this year not a draftable prospect, and now you start to see him creeping up in second rounds of mock drafts. It's a great linebacker class, and I think he's done a nice job of separating himself from others. And shout out to General Manager Patrick Mahomes for cooking up some really good additions in the portal because that what they did at Texas Tech this year, like it's the only team that even comes close is Indiana, which obviously they've just been extremely good at that, but they've done such a great job at getting the most out of their transfer portal guys. So I love Jacob Rodriguez. It's hard to not be excited about him. I think his best, like, I don't know about him staying straight up at a Mike linebacker role at the next level. I think he'll be a better weak side backer than he would be just your on the field for all three downs. But that's still a really valuable role. And, him playing next to Nick Bolton, don't tempt me. Like, I would love to see that.
So that's the question. Like when you look at linebackers, it's now the 6'4", 235 are either fast as hell like a Patrick McQueen or they are just like Abdul Carter, violent athletically. He's not that. I've heard people say, well, he's closer to 6 feet than 6'1". Him, Torian York, well, they get just washed out because they're not monsters. And look, we've seen it. I know you, the Chiefs, have seen it with Nick Bolton, who they've said he's a little, Bolton's a little more thicker and more muscular. But with Jacob, I mean, again, you love the stash, you love the attitude, you love that he has that, heavyweight punch that can knock balls out. You love the fact that he knows how to get around the ball. Does he have the NFL athletic ability to thrive in a game where it's almost like now basketball on turf, where it's everybody's fast, everybody's quick, and running backs are going to look at him and see, well, let's see if we can outrun this guy and just leave him in the dust.
Yeah, I do think, he's a guy that if you're going to play regularly on the field, you probably want a nice Sam complement to or a nice downhill Mike. Like, I'm not necessarily sure you want him on the field with another smaller linebacker because I do think it would leave you a little bit vulnerable to the run. But this kind of just goes back to infrastructure too. Like the Chiefs, they're a team that ask a lot of their corners in run defense. Not a lot of some teams don't, right? And part of that goes next to what the Chiefs ask of their edge rushers. Like the Chiefs, they don't want that stand up smaller outside linebacker. They're going to ask their edge defenders to help set the edge and to seal that off and to keep the line of scrimmage and hold at the point of attack. With Rodriguez, you can take that type of guy if you've got a Leo Chanel. You can take that type of guy if you've got a great interior defensive line that can really hold up. And then, him and Nick Bolton would like complement each other well, where Nick Bolton's less of that sort of coverage guy and more of the downhill hammer looking for a nail type of player. So I certainly think that there's some needed infrastructure to bring in a Jacob Rodriguez, to bring in, the kid from Pitt, who had a really great Senior Bowl too, another guy who's more of a coverage first guy. But with all that being said, this is what the way the league is trending. And as long as he just tests moderately, which there's some very good linebackers in the league who aren't relative athletic score monsters, I don't foresee it being an issue.
All right, this is going to be, and we probably won't find this out till the combine. So, all right, Jermond McCoy, what should we expect? He has not played since almost now 2 years. Last time he was on the field was in basically December of 2024. Didn't play at all last year, and yet you look at 2024 tape, and it's like, ooh, this is a guy who might be that, perfect cover corner. 6 feet, 193 pounds. He, strong physical corner. He is a speed to match up. That's from 2024, though. So when you're doing a scouting report, especially on him, and we've seen this with a lot of draft people, like how do you scout a guy where it's like, okay, you've been out for a year, so how good are you after basically taking a year off because of injuries?
Yeah, I definitely think the combine will be important for him, right? Like he needs to come out and look 100% and look like himself and be ready to answer questions about why he took the full year off. There was rumors that he was going to be back early fall, and as Tennessee's season kind of went down the drain, he just ultimately decided not to when he probably could have. We've seen this type of thing happen before. We know, like I think it was Nick Bosa who basically played a little bit of that season and then just opted to never come back because he was getting ready for the draft. And we've even seen players just flat out take a year off, like Jamar Chase, that 2020 season with the COVID year. He took that full season off and still was the player the highly touted prospect that he was. So I definitely think, he needs to come in and have answers ready for it and look okay athletically. As far as the player goes, though, the 2024 tape, I mean, you can probably the most fun game to watch is him go play Ohio State and play up against Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka. And they go blow for blow in that game. Like McCoy gets the best of them sometimes, Jeremiah Smith gets the best of them sometimes. But I think, if you're talking about like a Derek Stingley type, a guy who is your true just alpha cover corner on the outside, set it and forget it. He's got a knack for the ball, competitive at the catch point, high level mover when he was healthy. So as long as you see a full recovery there, I don't see a reason why he frankly should fall out of the top 15 or so. Him and Mansour Delane are kind of nice complements to each other, different skill sets, what they do. I think McCoy, at least in 2024, was the better athlete. And, it was an ACL tear. It sounded like it was mostly clean, and he's had plenty of time to recover it. So hopefully he just comes back the full version of himself. Because if you're the Rams, this is the exact type of guy you need, where like we're just gonna go get a real cover outside corner and stop messing around with this Emmanuel Forbes stuff.
I keep reading the Sky Report, so maybe you can give us, some of us here an explanation. They say he's not considered injury prone towards ACL. I mean, isn't that? I mean, I get it's not like let's say Jordan Tyson, where it's sort of a hamstring pull here, a quad there, not also an ACL. But again, when you miss a full year due to a torn ACL, shouldn't there be? I mean, when you're doing your mocks, should there be concern? Like, okay, will this be healthy? Will this get injured again? Like knees aren't one of those things where it's like you don't need like you kind of need your knees and your legs in the NFL.
Yeah, I would just point to like non-contact ACL injury, and that's the only injury I would say like that doesn't scream like a track record of injury prone versus like you talk about a guy like Tyson where it was several things. It was this, and then it was soft tissue stuff, and it was a knee, an ankle, those type of things. Like that's where you start wondering a little bit. Also, the frame for McCoy, I think, is like he's durable enough on the outside. You might, if this was D'Angelo Pons or someone like that who's a little bit smaller, you might have those concerns about it. And then also I think you just look at the overall track record of what were they throughout their career. Were they missing games every year? Were they looking to get back in? Like something that's a big pet peeve of mine is like guy who says he's going to go, yeah, I'm good to go. I'm going to play through it. And then like halfway through the first quarter, he's ruled out because of the injury. It's like, well, we just wasted a roster spot on you. You said you were ready to go and you're not. So when he was on the field and contributing, he was ready to go. And I'll give him credit for that, for being able to do it and step up to the plate whenever he was able to, and then knowing when to not step in when it was not time. So injuries, they're one of those things that are messy. But in a year when Eli Raridan, the tight end from Notre Dame, has had like two ACL surgeries, that's a little bit more concerning, right? Because it's like, so if he tears his ACL again, it'll be his third ACL tear. But then again, Michael Penix was a top 10 pick, and he had multiple ACL surgeries and is now on his third. So maybe teams reach a little bit more for quarterback, obviously with Penix being the case, but I don't think there's enough to say that there's a true injury label on him, especially if he comes to the combine and is cleaned up and ready to go.
Final player we're going to talk about, and this is the one that I still have no idea why he's going this slow, because even in theory, you could argue he might even be better than his teammate, Caleb Downs. Sonny Styles. We've seen him mocked as low as maybe 19, sometimes 15. And yet you look and it's like, okay, he's 6'5", 243, excellent sideline to sideline speed. Everybody says this is a guy who started at safety, Baltimore team linebacker, team leader, excellent, intelligence, only 21 years old. Why is this guy not mentioned as like the second pick overall when he plays linebacker? And you look and it's like the possibilities are endless. This isn't just a pass rushing linebacker. This isn't just a coverage linebacker. This, in theory, this is a guy you can go, we can do anything. This is sort of, the Frankenstein monster of linebackers. Let's see how far we can go with this.
Oh, you're not going to catch me saying that Sonny Styles isn't worth a top five pick. I love Sonny Styles. You just talk about the raw athleticism, his ability in coverage, how good he is at stacking and shedding blocks and getting underneath them. He's a math changer in the run defense for sure, and is so athletic and twitched up. Very sure tackler. Only one missed tackle this season. Unfortunately, came against in Miami, which is like, worst time for that. It seemed like a lot of Ohio State's guys just had their worst day against them in Miami. But yeah, man, I mean, Sonny Styles, this is why I kind of have a problem with Arvelle Reese, because like Sonny Styles is the better off-ball linebacker, and then there's better pure edge rushers in the class too than Arvelle Reese. But Styles, the athletic ability, I mean, this you watch his high school basketball highlights, and you're thinking that this guy's going to the other league, not this league. He had some serious Division One offers as a basketball player. He's just a special mover, a special athlete. This is the type of guy you look at and say, like, hey, can this be a Roquan Smith? Can this be a Fred Warner type of player who is one of those true unicorns who is a plus on the field in coverage? So if you're a team, I think both the Rams and the Cowboys are just salivating for him to get to them, because they both have a pretty big linebacker need. And my most recent mock for the website, I actually had the Chiefs doing a slight trade back with the Rams to 13, picking up an extra top 100 pick so the Rams can snipe Sonny Styles away from the Cowboys. So I think the only reason why he's not in that conversation is just, again, positional value. Like if we were to stack up the top four players in this class, it's probably an off-ball linebacker, a safety, a running back, and then maybe we can have an edge rusher discussion about Bain or Bailey, however you tier those guys. But yes, pure talent, just like making a list of damn good football players, he's near the top, if not at the top.
Does Luke Kuechly getting into the Hall of Fame sort of help push him maybe higher? Where you see where Kuechly was sort of that same build where it's like, okay, not a pass rusher, but man, when he was on the field, he was dumb. He could take over games, coverage, blitz. You could use him maybe as a blitz edge. Could Styles be that guy, or is it just basically well, this might be his best weight as he can get. You can't maybe put on 20 more pounds because they'll hurt him. Like when you see a guy like Styles, can you envision him being bigger and maybe stronger?
Yeah, I do think that there's, some room on his frame to get a little bit of weight, but I think like one of the misconceptions about how linebacker play works is that like, oh, well, this guy's smaller, so he can't stock, shed blocks, and when a lineman gets on him, it's over. He has ways to win against that are more based in speed and athleticism and instincts, right? So I think the tape says that this is a guy who is going to be able to stay on the field all three downs as a coverage guy and as a downhill guy. And his athleticism is part of what makes him so special. And I think the league would hopefully recognize that realistically, there's about like two or three linebackers in the NFL that matter, but the ones that do matter really matter and are really valuable. And he has that type of upside, and then like his floor is really high too, just because of, like I said, the athletic ability, his profile as a player, and what he's done. Like, you want to tell me, like, I think a lot of Chiefs fans would lose their mind if the Chiefs took Sonny Styles at 9, but I'd be throwing a party because I think year one he'd probably play weak side, replace Drew Tranquil, play alongside Nick Bolton, and then hopefully the next year he's getting the green dot. Bolton's moving over to the Sam, and then you've got a guy who can stay on the field who's an above average coverage guy. I mean, this guy can run stride for stride with your tight ends, with your running backs. He's probably not a guy you want to just like take straight slot snaps and try to cover a wide receiver there, but the athletic skills are special, and his ability to get around and shed and get underneath blocks is something that you rarely see from guys of his size.
Why is Arvelle Reese ahead of him? I mean, I know
I
you're asking that
you're
same
at
question.
yeah.
Yeah, you're like, why is that? This should be over. So, from what you've heard, why is it Arvelle Reese, who is an inch shorter, same weight, the guy that everybody's saying, oh, he's going to go number two, or hey, he might maybe drop to three. Like, why is he ahead of Styles when it seems like Styles is a guy that does more stuff? Is it just the edge thing, or is
I
it
I
something
think that's a
else?
big part of it. I mean, man, I watched Arvelle Reese, and there's about two or three plays that you can point to that say like, hey, here he is, line up as an edge rusher, not a blitzer, not a quarterback spy, against good NFL or good college talent, and he's winning as an edge rusher. Most of his sack production comes from blitz and QB spies, which he is just as twitchy, just as freaky as an athlete as Sonny Styles. The tools are all there. But to me, again, I think sometimes in the draft we measure players by their ceiling more than we should their floor. That's how you get Tyree Wilson a top 10 pick rather than looking at what the floor is. And if you're taking Arvelle Reese, you've got to have a plan for him on how it's going to work. And there's work that needs to be done. Now, he's very strong at the point of attack. I think the pressures are probably a better acknowledgement of what he is as a player. And I think him and Styles played off of each other. Like, there were some games, like I know a lot of people were chattering about, well, Arvelle Reese was just a no-show against the game in Miami. And I think that they were asking him to do some different things. Same with Indiana, where they were using him to kind of contain Mendoza a little bit. And that's part of that flexibility and stuff is part of what his versatility offers you. But to say that you have Reese, like taking a top five pick in Arvelle Reese, you want to catch me doing it. Just because, again, I think personally there's some projection there, there's some growth that needs to happen. You're relying on traits and hoping it develops. Rather, you can look at the tape of Sonny Styles and say, there it is. I see it. That's what we need. And he's doing it against high level competition week after week.
So that's the big. Before we let you go, that's the big question. Like ceiling floor, as you said. And I was thinking about this here. Guys like Caleb Banks, guys like, we'll say, even to a lesser extent, probably Colton Hood. You look at them and you go, maybe it's worth the risk. Yes, they have industries, maybe this, but I mean, God damn it! Look at Caleb Banks, 6'6", 320 pounds. Look at that speed, that first quick step. Oh my God, they don't make humans like this. Same, you can say a similar thing with, as you said, Arvelle Reese. Like, okay, well, he's only 6'4", 243, but man, look at this. Linebackers don't move like this and push this aside. What is more important? If you have a top five pick, do you go with the floor or go with the ceiling? Like for you, how do you determine that when you're mocking people and doing this and you're going, well, he could be this, or it's going to be this? Like, how do you figure that out if it's worth it?
To me, I would measure it by what is the state of my roster overall. Like, I think for certain teams that just like really need to hit this, hit this pick out of the park, like the Browns or the Cardinals, like they really cannot afford to be picking up there and to get a maybe guy, right? Versus some other teams like, you think maybe about like the Commanders or someone like that where they've got this rookie contract flexibility. They can maybe take bigger swings. That's definitely where I would go to. It's kind of weird because the Chiefs kind of feel like a team that you should be able to say like, well, they've got this star quarterback. They've got all this winning in the bank. Like why do they need to be so cautious? And to me, that's more of just kind of a narrative about where the roster as a whole right now and what they need to do. But realistically, no team can afford to miss top 10 picks. Like that's just a cold hard fact. If you're picking up there, the goal is to not be picking there for long. So yeah, there's some risk there. And I will say some very trusted voices in the draft love Arvelle Reese, have him as a top 2 or 3 player. Dane Brugler's got him as #1 overall player. So you can't catch me saying that the traits aren't special, that they aren't there. But I don't know, man. Like I won't be surprised if we're sitting here saying a couple years, like, Arvelle Reese, what is he? What has he amounted to in the league? And it could be just that he does end up become Micah Parsons or whatever.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you got to check out his big board. He's still working on it. He's still adding a player here, there, every day. But one of the most detailed people outside of ESPN and CBS and John Vogel that you'll ever see. I give you once again from Arrowhead Addict. I give you Price Carter. So Price, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is the Twitter, the YouTube channel, Rumble channel, X, and where can fans read more of his great articles that you have on the draft prospects?
Most of my stuff is on my Twitter profile at Price A Carter. All my written work is on the Arrowhead Addict website, just arrowheadaddict.com. There we've got a separate tab for the top 100 or the 100 prospects in 100 days project, and then on Sports Radio 810 WHB and here in Kansas City as well too.
Price Carter, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always honor, pleasure to have you on the show. We come back, we got a lot more going on here, only on it's Last Call. Last Call to the Alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.